Alright, so I'm going to be taking a look at the trailer brake controller here. This is a 2006 F350. So it's got the tow package, factory tow package, and the built-in tow controller in the dash here. And if we turn it on, we'll see that the controller's front display works. The gain seems to be going up when you adjust the lever for the manual trailer brakes, but it always gives an indication that there's a trailer brake controller fault on the instrument cluster. And so there was a aftermarket brake controller plugged in here with a nice harness that uses the factory plug on it. So I'm going to try to get the factory brake controller working here so that we can actually make use of it again, and I'll keep the other brake controller as a hot spare if for some reason I ever need to throw in another controller. But I would prefer to keep using the cleaner dash mounted controller that's in here right now. So if we turn it on, you can see that the display lights up. We have all the indications, and we can adjust the trailer gain. And what we get on the instrument cluster is a TBC fault. Check engine light is actually for a glow plug that I'm going to be replacing in here next. And when we slide the slider, you can see it gives us a beep saying that the trailer is disconnected, and it does show a gain as we slide it across. So we've got brakes on the trailer connector and everything else. So and the aftermarket controller seems to be working just fine. So the issue appears to be with the brake controller itself. So we're going to pull it out and take a look at what we can find wrong. So to pull it out, we have to open up this door down here, and then you can reach up in here, and there's a plastic lever on the side that you can push down, which will release it. And then you can slide the brake controller forward. And then it's got connectors on the back, which are pretty hard to get back here. So I'll try to get those from inside. Might have to pull it forward and grab a screwdriver to pop those loose. Yep, and grab a screwdriver. Alright, I'm going to pull this forward and then pop out the connectors. Sorry for bumping the camera. It's a tight fit on this connector. There we go. And that's the brake controller. Not much to it. Hardest part is just getting the connectors off the back side. So we got two plugs. This one is the brake switch, power, and power back to the trailers and ground. And then this one is the communications side of things that connects up to the dash and gives the indications and alerts. Well, I shouldn't say the alerts, because the dash will give the alert even if the trailer controller is unplugged. So, but it's vehicle communications off of that port. Alright, now I've got the brake controller on the bench here, and we're going to open it up and take a look here. And we can see that there's a couple screws that hold it together. There's a screw back here, here. This one just holds the clip on, but I'm going to take it off just so it doesn't get in the way with the face there. And then we've got these screws here, as well as this screw in the face. And they're all Torx bits, real small ones, except for this one, which is actually an Allen wrench here. So I'm going to take it apart so we can get inside. And that's just my soldering iron getting up to temperature here for the desoldering station. Right. One back here. flipping it over, I'm going to grab this clip off in the front. As well as these two screws back here. Alright, now we can lift this cover off, come straight up, and then we've got this front circuit board here. And we're going to be resoldering some connections inside this board down here. So we're going to pull that out. So you can see it's held on with a little clip right down here and here. Those little knobs just sit on top of pins from the plastic, and then it's held in down here. So I'm going to pull this forward and lift it up, and we can pull that out just like so. And then I'm going to grab a small screwdriver tip, little small flat blade, to stick in the screwdriver here, so that I can lift up the corners on this electrical connector here, and just to get it working loose here. So grab the wires carefully, wiggle it back and forth, and the front comes out. And we're going to be working mainly with this front part right here. Inside the main body, we just want to check the electrolytic caps here, make sure that they're looking okay. Those look fine in here. They don't look like they've let go any of their electrolyte inside, and so no worries about anything on the main board here at this point. If you do need to take the main board out, you'll have to take these clips off along the sides, because those hold the transistors in. They use the body as a heat sink for the transistors. But what we're interested in is on this board here, and a couple of these circuit connections here. So try to make sure I stay in focus here. The problem seems to be with this potentiometer on the slider. You can see it slides down here, the part moving. There's a little linear potentiometer in here, and it's connected on with several of these solder joints here. And if we look close at this one, we can see we have looks like it's a cold solder joint on here. You can see a small ring around that joint. You can see that the left joint has a small dark ring around the entire joint, which means it has completely disconnected from the circuit board below and gets corrosion and whatnot in it that keeps it from connecting properly. And then the one on the right that I have circled is partially cracked along the left hand side, but seems to be intact on the right side yet. So that one probably wasn't having a failure point, but the left one was definitely going to be an issue. So what we want to do is we want to basically resolder those connections. And you could just heat them up and then resolder them, but I'd like to get rid of the old solder and put some fresh solder on. So I'm going to use a desoldering soldering iron with a solder sucker built in on it. If you don't have one of those, you can use a standard solder sucker like this, where you load it with the spring, melt the solder, set it on where you need to solder, pull the solder off, push the button, and then the plunger springs back and pulls the solder out. You can also use a desolder wick as well if you want to pull off the old solder, and just set this on top of the solder joint, heat it up with the soldering iron, and it will wick up the solder. I'm just going to pull the solder off with the soldering iron with the gun built into it, because it's quick and easy. So we'll get that melted, suck the solder off. It's got a pretty good conformal coating on that board. So I'm just going to do that to a couple of these here. And then I'm going to pull the wires out of the way and grab these back ones too. I'm not worried about this solder or the component falling out once I pull these out, because it's got enough stuff holding it in here. That won't be an issue. I definitely put a very thick conformal coating on these boards. It's good to see for corrosion aspect, but that's what that stuff is bubbling up around all the pins. Alright, so that pulls the solder off. For putting it together, I'm going to go back to the standard soldering iron, and I'm going to clean up the ends a little bit. I'm going to use some rubbing alcohol, just standard 91% isopropyl alcohol with Q-tip, and the soldering iron's up to temperature. So we'll just go over everything here, clean up the bits of conformal coating that you scraped off, dry it up. I'm just going to put on a dab of RA flux at each of these points. There's flux in the solder already, so we don't really need to, but I just want to make sure they're extra clean and give them every chance they can have of sticking well this next time. Alright. So, had to change tips on the soldering iron because I realized after I heated it up that I had the wrong tip in here. Not the one I wanted to use. So, all we have to do now is heat up each of the pins in the solder joints. We're going to burn off the flux here a bit, so sorry about the camera. It's going to get the smoke going right at it, I'm sure. But the flux helps clean up all the joints, make sure that everything is nice and clean as we solder in or resolder our joints here. Give it every chance it can have of working for us. Now for this, I like working with the really thin solder because it makes it a lot easier to control how much is going on. So we'll take another Q-tip. We're just going to clean up each of these joints, give them a quick inspection, see if we have to touch up any with a little bit more solder, or if we're good with what we have. Alright, and those look good. We want to make sure that when we solder it, let it focus here, that you have a good connection here. It's hard to get on the camera here focused, but you want, you know, you don't want a big ball of solder on there. You just want a nice little kind of little tapered edge from the pad onto the lead. That's all you need. So now we can put this back together. So this sits on the board here, connector goes back in. So first thing we're going to do is put the connector back in. Now these are directional, so make sure that you put them in the right way. The pins are closer to one edge, so you want to make sure you get that in there the same way that it's supposed to go back in. And just going to do this off camera here. Try to get the pins lined up and then just push it back in place. Make sure it's fully seated, and then make sure our plastic pin goes underneath so that it's underneath the body where it needs to go. And then we can lift it up and then set the pin back in place on each side. We're going to set that back in. You have to fight, the wires here are really close to the case, so when you feed it in there, it's gonna push those wires between because they're kind of pinched. but we'll get that in there, and then just to hold that in place, I'm going to grab this little screw here and put that back in with the Allen wrench. So that's back in. And we can flip it back over. We set our cover back in. That slides straight down like that. And then we can put all those screws back together. And then just like that, it's ready to go back into the truck and test out if it works. Alright, now we're back at the truck here. We're ready to put it back in. So it's pretty much the same as it was to remove. We're going to slide it in here, reaching back, plug in the connectors. Little bit of a tight fit to reach them in here, but not too bad. Yep. There, yeah. Reach up from underneath into them. Alright, now they're both snapped in. We just slide it back into the dash, back in place there. And now, turn it on. We get the display to light up, but we no longer have the TBC failure message that shows anymore. We can manually push the brake button. We get the trailer disconnected message as we're supposed to get. So we're back to a functioning brake controller with no more TBC failure modes on the instrument cluster to have to clear every time that you want to see what your mileage is, or what your miles per gallon is, or miles till empty, etc. That gets displayed there. So good luck with it. Hope it works on your vehicle.